Good morning.
I could see your car till I couldn't anymore. I could see the trail that you left.
Welcome to the Political Spectrum Podcast. We're back.
I could see your point.
It's the morning. We made it. You made it.
I could see the trail that you left. On an ordinary day.
Well, we got a lot to talk about today, and we promised that we were not going to talk about the election. We're not going to talk about Kamala Harris. We're not going to talk about the assassination attempt on Donald Trump. And we're not going to talk about President Joe Biden. And saying we're not going to talk about it does not count as talking about it. That's not talking. That's just saying what we're not going to talk about. We haven't talked about any of those things. We've just said those things. All right. Whoa. All right, let's bring the music down. So what are we going to talk about? Well, let's just start with where are we? Where are you? I don't know where you are. There's a lot of you. There's more of you every single day, which is super cool. I don't know, maybe you're driving your car to work. Do people still work in places? A lot of people do. Maybe you are driving to open up a bakery and get the coffee going for other people that are on the way to work or just don't like making coffee at home. Maybe you're going into the office, or maybe you're a defense attorney going to do their honor and give somebody a vigorous defense of the law. That reminds me, I just finished watching the HBO program Presumed Innocent, starring Jake Gyllenhaal and a bunch of other people. And it was really good. And last night was the season, I guess, series finale. It's like a mini series or whatever they call it, like a limited engagement. And it was great. I thought it was good. I just finished, so I'm not gonna tell you, no spoilers, okay? So if you haven't seen the final episode, no spoilers. I'm just gonna say I think it's worth watching. The writing is really good. Of course, you know there's gonna be a twist at the end, and there is a twist at the end, and it's a pretty good twist. It's not a Deus ex machina as we used to learn about in my brief time in college. But, it's a twist that is a surprise, but it's not unfair. It's not an unfair surprise. Anyway, watch the show. It's really good. It's about a district attorney, right, in Chicago. And he gets accused of a terrible crime. And the tables are turned, because as a prosecuting attorney, he spent his career putting people in prison, and now he's trying to stay out of prison. How is he going to do it? It stars Jake Gyllenhaal. It's really good. So I don't know, lawyers on the mind. All right, I have to confess something to you, our loyal listeners. I have not been honest with you today. I've been lying to you today, just like Jake Gyllenhaal's character, Rusty Savage, in Presumed Innocent on HBO. Why do I keep saying HBO? Apple TV, who does not sponsor us, by the way. But if they wanted to, we'd be open to it. And I apologize to those of you at Apple TV that are considering offering us an endorsement deal for misspeaking. It feels like it should be an HBO show. That's a compliment, Apple TV. Take it. Take the compliment. Just say thank you. So I have, just like Rusty Savage in that show, Presumed Innocent, I haven't been honest with you because I have been presenting myself today as though it is Tuesday morning. But I have to confess to you, it is Tuesday morning for you, but it's not Tuesday morning for me. For me, it is... Am I saying Tuesday morning? Gee whiz. Wednesday morning. It's Tuesday night for me. That's what I'm trying to say. It is Wednesday morning for you. It's Tuesday night for me. Although technically it's past midnight. So it is morning, but I don't think that would get me past a court of law in Rusty Savage's world. And I don't think it'll fly with you guys either. I want us to be on a place of transparency and honesty together. So it is Wednesday morning for you. It's late Tuesday night for me, and that's okay. Do you want me to tell you why? I'm going to tell you why. Because I want you to be able to enjoy what we're doing today in the morning as you get ready for whatever it is that you're doing for the rest of the day. I want you to get off on a good foot. I want you to feel like you have an idea of what's going on in the world without feeling like you're dragged down by what's going on in the world. And in order to get that out for you in time, I got to do it the night before because it takes some time for the podcast to be posted and then disseminated to the various distribution channels. I think it takes like an hour. So even if I were to get up at and start recording this thing at 7 a.m. in a given morning, let's say it's 40 minutes of dialogue or monologue really, and maybe another 20 minutes of cleaning up the fade ins and the fade outs and the music. And I got to write up the little descriptions. Believe it or not, I don't have a team to help me with that. I know that's probably a shock to you. Write up the little descriptions. The whole thing takes about, not that bad actually, but it takes maybe an hour and a half to produce these, maybe 2 hours. And yeah, and then it takes another hour for that to go from the Spotify podcast distribution, which is what we use, to Apple or iHeartRadio or Spotify. Actually, post instantly on Spotify, but it takes a little time to go to the other channels. So if I started working on this thing at, let's say, 6:30 a.m., I'd be done by 8:15, 8:30, and it wouldn't be out until 9:30 Central Time. That's 10:30 East Coast time. You get what I'm saying? I gotta do it the night before, but I gotta do it late enough that the news of the day has already been put out. So here I am. Why am I telling you this? Well, for transparency and for honesty, and because I really like to set the tone for what I'm doing. And what I'm doing is I'm sitting at the desk here, beautiful desk, at the Political Spectrum Studios, Studio C, and it's evening, and this place is really nice in the evening, you know? All the Michaels kids are asleep. Mrs. Michaels is asleep. And there's a lot of lights and stuff, blinking lights. You know, people on the spectrum really like lights, they say. And I do like lights. So I don't know. Maybe that's evidence. I don't know. Mrs. Michaels says it is. But it's great. There's all these lights from the various devices that process the recording. It's really nice. And I'm drinking right now a Bass Armagnac. It's like a cognac. And the I don't know if I'm saying this right, but the house that makes the one that I'm drinking is Castaridi, I think, or maybe Castared. Somebody correct me. It's French though, so I'm probably saying it wrong. I also know that Castared. I don't know. That's terrible. I ought to be able to do better than that. But anyway, I got this because I actually got it back in Christmas because I wanted to start drinking fancier drinks. I'm just being honest with you. I wanted to feel classy. And it seemed like the classiest thing you could get when I was reading the label. Founded in 1833, Castared. Let's do a French accent to get into it. We drink, this is, and how do you say in this language? Castared, maybe? Castared? But there's an accent, Castared? Who knows? Maybe we can look it up. Who knows? Anyway, I'm embarrassing myself. Armagnac trading house, right? It's the oldest registered Armagnac trading house, led by, I'm reading from the back of the bottle here, led by a 6th generation owner, Florence Castared. The house is known worldwide for its multi-awarded blends and exceptional collection of vintages dating as far back as 1893. Castared is one of the rare recipients of the coveted quality certification Living Heritage Company, a symbol of recognition for the excellence made in France for more than 185 years. And then the description continues, and it just sounds great. Concentrating their aromatic richness, then aged in black Gascon oak casks, right? Here's the thing. I actually don't really like the taste of it very much. The bottle's great, but it just kind of tastes like old wine. But I'm drinking it anyway. I figured I'd try it. And I have this lovely little snifter glass that Mrs. Michaels found for me at an antique shop, and it's got some sort of a clipper or a four. It's a ship, right, on it, embossed with 4 big sails, and I don't know. But I figured I'd give it another try. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I like it more than I did back in December. But maybe I'm not that classy. I think maybe I'm just a bourbon person. But either way, it really seems to fit the mood this evening as I am recording this. It probably doesn't fit your mood as you're driving. So if you want to be imagining that I am drinking a delicious espresso drink made from my favorite espresso machine by Breville, who does not but could sponsor us, you can imagine that. You can imagine anything you want to. This is how the world works. And this is how this podcast works. You can make of it anything that you want. But I'm going to tell you the truth. And that is probably the only, it won't be the only time, but let's just not be confused on the mornings versus the evenings. Okay. I think that we have established this. Okay. I think we're clear on it. So what are we going to talk about in terms of the news? Well, today is our second installment of the world famous Taking the World by Storm TPS Report. The TPS Report. The TPS Report, so named as an homage to the very hilarious Office Space shot just up the street from where I sit. Also, the political spectrum report. What is it? We're going to go through some of the news of the day, and we're going to look at it from the left, from the center, and from the right, and we're going to observe, because we're not going to be consumed by the news. We're going to consume it. We're going to digest it. We're going to spit it out if we want to, even. But we're not going to be owned by it. We're going to learn from it. And that's what we're going to do. Before we do one further thing, I have decided that I'm going to change the titling system for our episodes. And this is a real big decision for me because, first of all, any decision is a big decision for me. That's just how my brain works. It's frustrating. But I have put a lot of thought into it. I'm not going to explain all of it to you, but basically the Too Long Didn't Read version, Too Long Didn't Listen, they should have that, TLDL. Too Long Didn't Listen is, I'm going to start doing more descriptive titles of these episodes so that you can look at the title and know what's in it. Even though I really like my titles, I really enjoy the zingy titles. Everybody's quitting in the weirdest ways. That was that was the title for yesterday's episode. Maybe the title should have just been Director Cheadle resigns and Joe Biden decides not to run for re-election. Here are JJ's thoughts. That would have been a little clearer. I don't know. I'm going to experiment with that. So today is TPS Report 2. We're going to go through some of the news. I want to start with something that I posted on our X, formerly known as Twitter, account, which you can find at JJ Michaels Show. It's whatever the right? That's how you do it. At JJ Michaels Show. That's our Twitter account. And it's a story from the Washington Times. It's got a clickbaiting, fear-mongering headline. Liberals' war on wealth comes for your retirement. It's a bummer of a headline because it's a great article. And I think the headline will probably turn off, unfortunately, a lot of the people that really need to read this article. It's an opinion piece written by E.J. Antoni and Ben Otteson, published Tuesday night. It's a really good article, and they go into the expected outcomes for the average person of what the proposed raise to the top capital gains tax rate would be, right? So the Democrats have proposed to raise the capital gains rate to just under 40%. It's about double the current rate, which would be a really, really high capital gains tax rate, highest in 100 years. The problem with this is that it will apply even to unrealized gains. So what that means is that it could hypothetically apply even in scenarios where, for example, the gain is simply caused by inflation, and they talk about this a lot. But the quote that I pulled from the article and shared with X, I just thought was really interesting, and I don't think most people are aware of this. Here's the quote. Over the last 3.5 years, the Dow Jones Industrial Average Stock Index has increased substantially in price, right? We know that the stock goes up, and the stock market has been continuing to go up. Back to the quote. Still, almost 70% of that increase has been a result of the dollar losing value as opposed to an increase in the real worth of its constituent companies. Did you get that? I'm going to read it again faster. Over the last 3.5 years, the Dow Jones Industrial Average Stock Index has increased substantially in price. Still, almost 70% of that increase has been the dollar losing value as opposed to an increase in the real worth of its constituent companies. Or what in the world does that mean? What does that mean? Here's what it means. The stock prices are going up, right? That we get. That part you probably understood. I understood it, right? But the reason they're going up is not what you might expect, which is that the companies that make up the Dow Jones, the businesses that are on there, are increasing in value. That's normally what we expect is driving up stock rate. But what's actually increasing the price of these stocks, what's making, the stock that you paid $50 for now worth $80, is not that company is more valuable. It's that the dollar is less valuable. In other words, the 20% aggregate inflation that we've experienced in the last 3 years is the primary driver, according to this data, of nearly 3/4 of the stock market's increases. What does that tell you? It tells you a couple things. First of all, it tells you that growth in the stock market is not the positive economic indicator necessarily that both the left and the right would have you believe. Trump, in his recent nomination acceptance speech, touted that as an accomplishment during his administration, neglecting to mention, by the way, that the stock market has continued to go up in the Biden administration. Fair enough. He's not stumping for Biden, he's stumping for himself. But it doesn't necessarily mean that things were great. Now, I actually think that the economy was very strong during most of the Trump years, but I'm not so sure that the increase in stock market is the best indicator of that. And all you need to do is to look at the recent years of the stock market, where we can look around and we can see that there are some serious economic struggles, both in terms of inflation, a struggling real estate market, real wages, meaning corrected for inflation wages, real wages are stagnant at best. There's some problems, but the stock market continues to soar. Now, with this article, you can find it on X at JJ Michael's show. It's from the Washington Times. What this article is saying is that the reason for the increase in stock market is not a sign of economic health of these businesses. In fact, it's a sign of economic sickness of the dollar. It's a great article. It talks about a lot of other things. Now, I have to tell you, as somebody who is familiar with the startup world, the startup technology world, this is a particular issue for me and a lot of my colleagues, middle class at best colleagues, and my own family, middle class at best, because you might be familiar with the concept of, equity or shares that folks get when they are working in an early stage startup, because you've probably heard of people who were at Facebook or something like that getting, millions of dollars when Facebook went public, and other similar stories, right? eBay, PayPal, all these type of things, and more recent ones too. What you don't hear as frequently is that the companies that don't go public, the shares that are given to employees, they can't be bought or sold. What's the problem with that, JJ? Maybe they can when the company goes public, maybe not. Well, there's a huge problem with that. The huge problem with that is that when those shares are vested and exercised, I'm going to explain what all this means. The IRS and the tax code sees that as income, capital gains income, even though the shares aren't liquid and can't be sold, and they tax you on it like income. It's brutal. So what do I mean by that? Let's imagine that you have received 10,000 shares of company of JJ Michael's show stock, okay? Right. We don't have stock, but let's imagine that we did, okay? And let's just say that our filings, we don't need to get into how this works, but let's just say our filings tell the IRS that that stock is worth $10 a share. Once you actually exercise those options, and all that the exercise means is that you take the option to buy the stock that I've given you as your CEO, and you accept that option and you do buy the stock at whatever strike price I gave you, usually pretty cheap, maybe a quarter, maybe $1. Let's say it's $1. So you buy the stock for $1. Remember, you can't sell it. You're buying it from me, basically. I'm oversimplifying, but it works. So now you spent $10,000 on the stock because you bought 10,000 shares for $1. You really spent that money. A year later, the IRS says it's worth $10. The IRS looks and says, your stock is worth $100,000. You've earned $90,000, and you owe us taxes on that $90,000. And that tax bill can be as high as 20 or 30 grand. The problem is your stock can't be sold. It's still private. I'm oversimplifying this. I'm probably going to get flaming emails saying, JJ, you don't understand how it works. I do understand how it works. I'm just breaking it down so we can discuss it in a podcast. So the sort of proposals to make the capital gains tax even more punitive are moving us in the wrong direction, because what these tax laws do is they make it impossible for lower working class people to move up to the middle classes. They make it impossible for middle class people to move up into the upper classes, and make it impossible for the quote unquote upper class people to move into the hallowed 1% territory of the elite. And that's really wonderful if you already have boatloads of money. But if you believe the idea that America is supposed to be a place where you work hard, and if you work hard enough, you can make anything of yourself and all that stuff, these types of rules are antithetical to that. And they're pitched as wealth redistribution. They're pitched as everybody pay their fair share. But what they actually do is prevent wealth accumulation from the very people that need and deserve the most help from society. People that work hard and are trying to move up the rungs and weren't born with it and are trying to earn it. It prevents them from getting it. That's a real bummer that the folks, in this case, I think the left, that genuinely want to help people to help society achieve more balanced income, right? Close the gap between the haves and the have-nots. They're going about it in a way that actually has the opposite effect. It's a bummer. Read this article. If you're a Democrat voter or a Republican or whatever it is, if you have a Democrat representative, you need to read and understand these things so that you can raise your voice and say, I want income equality. And that's why I don't like this idea, because it will achieve the opposite. It is not some evil fat cat, striped suit, slick back hair, what's the Wall Street, the movie Wall Street or American Psycho type thing to say that raising taxes on the investments of middle-class Americans is counterproductive to actual real spreading of America's massive riches. That's something that the left and the center and everybody should have a problem with. Okay. Well, that's the first thing. Woo, day. Yeah. Is that a light start? I don't know if it's a light start or not, but it's a thing that should unify us. Anyway, it's a really well-written article, and despite the scare headline, liberals, war on wealth comes for your retirement. Look out. And by the way, it's great. There's the illustration that goes with the headline is it's a cartoon depiction of a sheep, and inside the sheep is a golden egg in a bed of straw, which I think is meant to represent a nest egg. And then the sheep is kind of looking off to the side, but then looking right at you is an illustration of a wolf with red eyes and a shield that looks like an American flag, and he's staring at you. And it's pretty obvious they're saying is that the wolves are coming for your nest egg, you sheep. Look out, look out. They're coming for your retirement. Okay. It's just bad policy. That's all there is to it. And the last point on this particular issue is that it is a little bit interesting. I've asked many times over the last couple of years, don't these people know that their policies could have the effect of increasing inflation? And it's interesting to think about the fact that an inflation increase actually, if laws like this go through and increases like this go through and changes in how taxes are assessed go through, could result in more revenue capture for the federal government. It's almost like they might stand to benefit. And additionally, part of this proposal, they've been trying to do this for a few years, by the way, part of these new proposals are to include real estate in capital gains in new ways that hasn't been done before. So, first of all, this disincentivizes people to put homes on the market. That's not good, because the big thing that is making real estate unattainable or difficult to attain, the quote-unquote American dream, is low inventory. So if you punish people for selling their property, what are they going to do? They're going to hang on to it until more favorable laws come into play. And the other part of that is that the inflation itself can drive up the price of real estate artificially, and then that can then be taxed. This is a potentially ugly cycle. We don't want to get into this. Nobody wants to get into this. I have friends all across the political spectrum, hence the name of the show. And I don't know any of my friends, the farthest left or the farthest right, that want us to get into a continued inflationary spiral. Nobody wants that. Let's not do it. And we have the power. We have the power. The people have the power. The people have the power. Power to the people. You do, because you can arm yourself with knowledge and information, and you can then share with your elected leaders, hey, we've got this knowledge and information. Your policy stinks. Don't do it. And they won't, because they don't want to want to lose your vote, but they also don't want bad policy. So we got to think these things through a little bit more. All right. Well, I feel like we're off to a good start. Let's go through some of the news of the day. News of the day. All right. So I am at allsides.com right now. And I encourage you to check out this site because, as I mentioned before, it's pretty cool. And what it does is it takes all of the most popular news sites. It categorizes them by their media bias, left, left, center, right, right. So dark blue, and then they do a color, right? So there's a L on the far left that's a dark blue, a light blue L, a purple center. I think we've decided it is a mauve R and a bright red R, right? So there's 5 categories ranging from far left to far right, and it ranks their bias. And then it just kind of gives you the stories of the day with the caveat of who's delivering that news, right? I don't know. It's easier to see than it is to explain. Maybe I'm explaining it. Whatever. Go to the site. I'm there right now. So we're going to do it a little bit differently today. We're going to go down the news from the left column, and we're going to skip any news that has to do with the election, because I promised we would. Skip that. And then we're going to go down from the news of the center. Then we're going to go down from the news of the right. Then we're just going to start. Okay. So news from the left. Unfounded rumor says Biden had undisclosed medical emergency in Vegas in mid-July. This one comes from Snopes, which all sides puts as medium left. And it says in the months leading up to November 2024 U.S. presidential election, an online rumor claimed U.S. President Joe Biden suffered a serious undisclosed medical emergency during his stay in Las Vegas between July 15th and July 17th. That like just happened. They're making it sound like this was a long time ago. But the point is, it's not true. Well, that was easy. Yeah, it's just COVID. And he's back at the White House today. You know, he's old and he's wobbly, but not much has changed in the last week as far as we know. Okay. News from the center. Congressional panel to investigate Trump shooting. Okay. We're not going to talk about this, but that seems like probably a good idea. Top House leaders from both parties are setting up a bipartisan task force to investigate the attempted assassination. Former President Trump, led by House Speaker Mike Johnson and Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, or at least they both announced it together. They announced that today. That seems like a pretty good idea. Get to the bottom of it. It's good to hear that this appears to be a bipartisan thing for now. News from the right. Kamala Harris, this is from New York Post, which they rank as medium right. Kamala Harris told migrants, do not come to U.S., and 8 million showed up anyway, inside the Veep's legacy as border czar. I'm going to quote now. In perhaps her most famous speech as vice president, which she made in June 2021, after she was given responsibility for securing the U.S. border, Harris tried to convince migrants to stop flooding into the U.S. in the wake of President Biden's 2020 election victory. And then there's a quote from Vice President Harris that says, I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come, she said. The United States will continue to enforce our laws and secure our border. End quote. The article continues. What followed that statement was record illegal crossings at the southern border of more than 6.3 million migrants and at least 1.5 million others who got in by sneaking past law enforcement. I think they call those gotaways, which I just think is a really fun name for a not fun thing. Gotaways. Anyway. Okay. I'm not going to read the whole article here, but yeah, I don't know. I mean, what's your point? Look, I don't think the vice president has very much power over any of this stuff. She didn't really do anything super helpful. I guess she could have come up with some sort of commission or idea. But, so yeah, I guess when she took office, Kamala said, don't come. And instead, over 3.5 years, 8 million illegal border crossings happened anyway. It's a lot of people. That's like New York City amount of people. Okay. Border's not going well. News from the left. Prosecutor versus convicted felon. How Democrats believe Harris's background changes the election. We're not going to talk about the election. One candidate spent her career. Yeah. That's kind of interesting position. They're saying that this is from USA Today, which they rank as center left. They're saying that her history as a prosecutor puts her in an interesting position to battle Donald Trump. Oh, I saw this quote. She said, "I know Donald Trump's type." And then the article says, "A former prosecutor versus a man convicted of felonies." I'm not going to get into it because we're not going to talk about the election today. We're not talking about it. Can you see us? Can you hear that we're not talking about it? But that is kind of it's kind of a fun spin on the election. Fun way to think about it. Donald Trump has faced legal challenges, fair or unfair. He has faced them. And Kamala Harris has a background as the person who prosecutes legal challenges. Could be interesting. All right. Let's go some news from the center that is not election related. This is an interesting one. U.S. opens probe into Delta Airlines following widespread flight cancellations. I just don't understand this. So this is being led by the U.S. Department of Transportation, led by Pete Buttigieg. Probably saying it wrong. I should be able to say that right 4 years later. Mayor Pete, who is now Transportation Department Pete. And if you guys remember on Friday, there was that big cyber outage from a company called CrowdStrike was doing an update, and just a lot of things crashed. And as a result, Delta had to cancel more than 5,000 flights. What are we investigating them for? Let me read. Let's see. While other carriers have been able to resume normal operations, Delta has continued to cancel hundreds of flights daily due to issues with its crew tracker application. It goes on to say they've canceled 30% or more of flights through Monday. And here we go. Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg said on Tuesday the investigation is to, quote, ensure the airline is following the law and taking care of its passengers during continued widespread disruptions. Our department will leverage the full extent of our investigative and enforcement power to ensure the rights of Delta's passengers are upheld. Okay, but I don't see anything in the article, nor have I heard anything to indicate that Delta is violating any regulations on how you treat. This feels a little like a bunch of nothing. Why are they doing this? Delta's actually not that bad compared to the other airlines. And yeah, it's undeniably not their fault that their crew tracking app is down. Why is the Biden administration launching an investigation into the airline that's a victim of a network crash that they didn't cause? I don't get it. I really don't understand that at all. Well, I don't know. Should we follow this story? Let's see what happens. We can say we're going to follow the story, but hey, prediction, it's not going anywhere. It's going to be the last you hear of it. I guess this is just performative. Maybe Buttigieg is trying to jockey for position as a potential vice presidential pick for Kamala and show he's doing something. I have no idea what the reason for that would be. Your guess is as good as mine. Let me know if I don't know. If I don't know, let me know. Email me at jjmichaelsshow@gmail.com. I'd love to hear what you think about that one. Okay, and let's do one more. Let's do news from the right. House Speaker Mike Johnson threatens to arrest. I'm sorry, I misread that. House Speaker threatens arrest, prosecution of anyone who disrupts Netanyahu's congressional address. This one comes to us from the Washington Times again. So, paywall. No, I can't read the whole article. I'm just going to have to go with the description. When you click before the paywall, you do see Mike Johnson's glasses, which I really like. He's a little bit smarmy, but I do just like him for some reason. I don't know. I think he's kind of funny. I'm a sucker for humor. I don't know. I think he's funny. Okay. Where did that go? So what? Well, here's the summary. I'll just read the summary. Since Washington Times has us under a cruel paywall. They built a wall. They built a paywall. House Speaker Mike Johnson informed lawmakers in a letter Monday that a zero-tolerance policy will be in effect for disruptions during Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to both chambers of Congress on Wednesday. Today, in his letter, the speaker noted that an increased police presence will be inside the House chamber and around the Capitol and urged lawmakers to make sure their guests stay in line. So what he's saying is that when the Prime Minister of Israel comes to speak later today to a joint session of Congress, meaning the Senate and the House, that he's going to have Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, will have zero tolerance to disruptions to Prime Minister Netanyahu's address, including guests of lawmakers. You know, you've probably seen this when you watch these things in the kind of like the upper deck. I don't know what they call it. The upper seats, you know, guests, famous people, family, who knows what, can be invited to attend. And Speaker Johnson is saying, don't invite people who are going to try and shout down the Prime Minister. You know, we saw some protests today. Maybe you saw them. You probably did. Folks in the Capitol building that were unhappy that the Prime Minister of Israel is coming to speak to Congress. Recently, we had Zelensky, president of Ukraine, come to speak to Congress. Here's my take on it. It's pretty simple. Whatever you think of Israel's reaction to the events that took place on October 7th with Hamas crossing over from Gaza into Israel and kidnapping and murdering, I think, 1,500 civilians, many of whom are still held hostage, raping grandmothers, the whole thing. It's bad. You know it. You know that. Whatever you think of Israel's response, whether you think their response is out of proportion, whether you think it's totally reasonable, whether you think Israel is genocidal, whether you think Gaza is genocidal, Hamas is genocidal, one way or the other, Benjamin Netanyahu is the highest ranking elected official of one of our longest standing allies in the world and our longest standing ally in the only modern democracy, quote unquote, in the region. You hear that all the time. The only modern democracy in the region. It's true, though, okay? Regardless of what you may think of Israel's actions in Gaza, they are a democracy. In fact, they're actually a pretty liberal democracy. They're much more like France or Sweden than they are like the United States. A parliamentary system, mostly socialist government, farther left certainly than we are. And my point is that even if you believe that Netanyahu is a war criminal and what Israel's doing is awful, this is still a U.S. ally, and we need to hear what he has to say. If that's your position, then you should be saying, Mr. Netanyahu, come to Washington and explain yourself. Explain yourself. Explain your actions. Explain your country's actions. That's what you should be saying if you are of the position that Israel is committing war crimes or genocide in Gaza. You should want to hear this man and call him to the carpet and hold him accountable. So I don't understand why people are saying that we shouldn't be giving him a platform. I'm just so tired of this from the left and the right. This whole shouldn't be giving people a platform. Guys, goodness gracious. When did we become so weak and vulnerable that we can't even hear people who disagree with us? Give them a platform. I got news for you. The whole world is a damn platform. Okay. And everybody's got one anyway. And we need more people speaking honestly on these platforms directly to us. That's what we really need, is things exactly like this. Let's hear what Netanyahu has to say. Rewind to Zelensky. Some people on the right say, this guy's just milking us. He's milking us. Donald Trump called him the greatest salesman in the world, talking about Zelensky. For in Trump's view, I think this is Trump's view, certainly the view of many on the right, hustling NATO and the United States into millions of dollars of aid, weapons, to fight the country that invaded them. Yeah, salesperson. I don't know. I think he doesn't mean it as a compliment, but Trump's a weird guy. Maybe he does mean it as a compliment. He did write The Art of the Sale after all, or at least Ghost wrote, or someone wrote it put his name on it. So yeah, but the point is that if you're of the opinion that Zelensky's a grifter, well, hey, come to Washington and explain yourself. And he did. And we listened, and I don't think many people changed their opinion. People that think he's the hero still think he's a hero. The people that think he's a grifter probably still think he's a grifter. Same with Netanyahu. I don't know that many people will change their position. I don't know that many people will even listen. But same thing. If you think he's a war criminal, well, hear his explanation of why he's not. And listen, you don't need to change your mind. And if you think he's a hero, defending his nation and his people from aggression, listen. And you'll probably still think that at the end. And though that's okay. You know what I'm saying, guys? It's okay for us to think different things. It's okay, I promise. It's really okay. Nothing bad is going to happen to you. If you surround yourself with people who disagree with you, I guarantee you nothing bad will happen to you. You'll be okay. You'll come through it fine on the other side. You just might. You might even learn something. That's possible. It's possible. I don't want to get crazy, but it is possible. It's also possible that you might be better at, for lack of a better word, prosecuting your own position. So if you listen to the people that disagree with you, that might actually help you to explain your opposition position. So bringing it full circle to Netanyahu's upcoming address today to the joint session of Congress. If you feel that Netanyahu is a war criminal, then you, of all people, should watch that address so that you can explain in a rational way to your friends and to others that might need to hear it why you believe that. And you can say, I've listened to this man's position and I believe he's wrong for the following reasons. And those types of things have impact. If everybody did that, it would have an impact. Let's imagine that Israel really is committing war crimes. Let's say that for the sake of this argument. And everybody that believed that listened carefully to the Prime Minister's address today, and then spent the next week or two carefully and soberly explaining their position to everybody that they knew. And that seriously eroded, and they convinced a lot of their friends because of their careful listening and their careful explaining. That would erode support for Israel, which then would erode support for continued munitions to support this war. And it could make a real impact. But you have to do the hard work to do that. You don't do it by performing. You don't do it by wearing a goofy hat or painting something on your t-shirt. You do it by listening, learning, and then turning around and teaching, really. Your friends, your kids, your family. But not teaching by preaching. Teaching by having conversation and demonstrating that you listened to the opposing position You modified your position as needed, and you represented it. Well, I hope you do that. And I don't know if I'm going to try to watch it. I am going to actually be physically in the office for my day job today. So I won't be able to watch it as it's happening, but I will watch it afterwards. And it ought to be interesting. You know what it's going to be. Netanyahu's going to explain what happened to his nation a little over a year and a half ago, and he's going to explain what they're trying to do to keep something like that from happening again. And as I said, some of you will think, well, that makes sense. And some of you will think, yeah, I listened, but I still think you're a crazy war criminal. Get out of my country, go home. That's okay. Just listen. All right, well, you, wonderful people, have been listening to me for a while now, and I really appreciate that. And I hope that whatever you're doing today, I hope it goes great. I hope wherever you're going, you get there safe. I hope that you feel appreciation for whatever you have today. The car that you're driving, the fact that it's running, or even just like the headphones or the earbuds that you're listening to this on, or whatever you're listening to it on. I hope you appreciate that it's working. Your internet's working. The podcast downloaded. And old JJ Michaels, well, he came out and came through for you one more time. And I'll come through for you tomorrow too. And all this week. Here at the Political Spectrum Podcast, we're so happy to have you. Subscribe to the thing so that you get notified whenever we post one of these babies. Go to our X, formerly known as Twitter page, and check out that Washington Times story. I think you should take a look at it. And we'll see you tomorrow. Bye.